We have a few members left to speak, and we want to make sure that every member has some time. At this time, Mr. Speaker, my very dear friend from the great state of California, the 13th Congressional District, who sits on appropriations and who has been a longtime champion of protecting women and protecting people. She is truly a champion for the least, the last, and the lost. I'm honored to ask the Honorable Barbara Lee to move to the podium and consume an appropriate amount of time. I might also add, Mr. Speaker, that she was the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, and I was proud to serve under her leadership.
Thank you very much. First, let me thank Congressman Al Green for that very humbling introduction, for your tremendous leadership, and for bringing us all together with, of course, Congressman Poe, for really pulling together this special order in recognition of October as Domestic Violence Awareness Month. It is so critical that we continue to raise the level of awareness in a bipartisan manner until we rid our country and the world of abuse and domestic violence. As someone who unfortunately understands domestic violence on a very personal level, a deeply personal level, I know how traumatic the experience is, and yes, I know what the support system and how important the support system is needed to emerge as a survivor. I also know that domestic violence is not only physical, but it's also emotional. It is brutal, it is dehumanizing to the battered and the batterer, and without strong and enforceable criminal laws and services, one's life can be shattered and destroyed. I know this from personal experience. Also, as a psychiatric social worker by profession, battered women's syndrome will totally destroy a woman's life if we don't address the counseling and mental health services that will really help women rid themselves of the syndrome which comes as a result of a lifetime of abuse. So as a member of the California legislature, I wrote, and I was very proud to write, the California's Violence Against Women's Act, and many, many domestic violence bills that were actually signed into law, Congressman Green, by a Republican governor, Governor Pete Wilson. And I continue to make this a priority in my congressional work. Now, in my district, there are several agencies, such as A Safe Place, which is a victim-centered agency. Agencies such as this, they do wonderful work for a minimum budget on issues and services and housing related to and for victims of abuse, and we need to enhance and raise the level of funding because they do wonderful work, as I said, on with minimal resources. We know that staying in a shelter or working with an advocate significantly improves the victim's quality of life. It's my hope that we use Domestic Violence Awareness Month to recommit ourselves to fighting the scourge of domestic violence against men and women. We have made accomplishments over the decades on this issue, including the passage of the Family Violence Prevention and Services Act and the Violence Against Women Act, which we fought hard to get reauthorized earlier this year under the bold and tremendous leadership of Congresswoman Gwen Moore and Leader Nancy Pelosi. These pieces of legislation have led to an increase of nearly 51% already, 51% in domestic violence reporting by women and a 37% increase in reporting for men. This is truly a significant impact. Yet sadly, challenges remain. Around the world, nearly 1 in 3 women have been beaten, coerced into sex, or otherwise abused in her lifetime. Here in the United States, as many as 1 in 4 American women report being physically or sexually abused by a husband or a boyfriend at least once in their lives. In my home state of California, the statistics are even more staggering. According to the Women's Health Survey, approximately 40% of California women experience physical, intimate partner violence in their lifetimes. Of these women, 3 out of 4 of them had children under the age of 18 at home. Children who see or experience domestic violence have a much greater chance to either become victims or perpetrators as adults. They're also more likely to attempt suicide, abuse drugs and alcohol, run away from home, engage in teenage prostitution, and commit other crimes. Beyond the cost to children, Domestic violence affects the economy, with as many as half of domestic violence victims reporting the loss of a job due at least in part to domestic violence. In fact, domestic violence costs employers in the United States as much as $13 billion each year, costs our healthcare system upwards of $5.8 billion, including $4 billion in direct healthcare expenses. So when we talk about the state of employment and the cost of healthcare, especially for women, the economic impacts of domestic violence and what we must do to eradicate it must be part of that conversation. We must prioritize investments in programs that domestic violence survivors rely on when escaping their abusers, including domestic violence programs and other programs of the safety net. When we fail to make the proper investments, women bear the consequences. Thousands of requests for domestic violence services go unmet. Thousands of calls to the National Domestic Violence Hotline go unanswered. And in times of economic downturn, the rates of domestic violence tend to increase. That's why this reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act was so very important. Not only were we able to increase outreach to victims on college campuses and expand protections for victims living on tribal lands, but for the first time we extended access to protections for immigrant and LGBT victims. And so as a member of the Appropriations Committee, I'm going to continue to fight for robust funding at all levels so that we can continue to provide victims with the services they need. With strong investments, we can address this crisis and end domestic violence once and for all. Although we've made great progress, we cannot claim victory. October is a critical time to raise awareness to what continues to be a pervasive issue in our country. But we must remember that for women, children, and men who are experiencing or who have experienced domestic violence, every day must be a day of awareness. So we must support all of the legislation and funding efforts that will indicate that finally, mind you, finally, we